Hey guys, how's it going? I'm the Duke of Italy, your favorite lo-fi fake fan music YouTuber. I'm a fake fan of the Rolling Stones, and I'm not even a fake fan of the Rolling Stones. I'm just never been that into them in the first place. They came to our country, they stole our rock music, and they messed up the Super Bowl halftime show by doing one of their 2000 singles, and that's just criminal. You can't do that when Prince was on that same stage. But irregardless, we got a new video today. Today we're continuing the ever interesting Shoegaze chart. And I already did a recording of this video. If you are seeing me talk on the Discord servers, you already know my frustration. But regardless, I'm still excited to talk about this stuff again because we just so happen to have kind of hit the jackpot when it comes to releases here. Today, I'm just going to say straight up, I think, honestly, today is the best 10 album run of albums I've discussed in a video that I haven't come up with on my own. Like I don't make these charts, and I don't think any of these charts have had even like 8 or 9 out of the 10 as a great album. But today, I think every single one of these is just fantastic in its own way. And as if you were checked in last time, we were just about to reach a tiny little introductory sort of cursory look at Black Gaze, because that's what it's pointing to on the chart. And that's where we get to. And these 3 albums here are on the Black Gaze Depression Guide that I've been covering around the same time. I've covered one of the albums already. I'll cover probably one in a week, and I'll probably cover another one in a few more weeks. But we'll start off with An Autumn for Crippled Children with Lost. This is the first of the 3 here, even though it's not as introductory towards Black Gaze as the other 2. In fact, I'd say this is pretty end game level Black Gaze. If there was a sort of like scale of like black metal to Black Gaze, and black metal is like your 10, and Black Gaze is like, say, you're 1, and I know already that's like not a huge level of changing here, then this Autumn for Crippled Children record would be like an 8 or like a 7. It's not like a black metal album that has like a Black Gaze tag just to kind of cover up for the fact that it's boring, because this album is not boring at all. It's actually incredibly engaging, and it delivers on every front. But this thing is downright abrasive, real black metal tones going on. And it takes a huge DSBM bend. It's very common for Black Gaze to have a depressive, suicidal black metal bend to it. Austere did it, Woods of Desolation did it, and those are really huge bands within the genre. And so we're seeing it again with one of the earliest projects from An Autumn for Crippled Children. And I've covered the album Try Not to Destroy Everything You Love by Autumn for Crippled Children, which is also a great record. So it kind of goes to show that they've had more of a lasting impact than a lot of other Black Gaze groups out there, especially their Apocynthions, which only have 1 album. Compared to future Autumn for Crippled Children projects, this one has a lot more subtle usage of synthesizers, and I think they work very effectively here. The song Ghostlight is one of my favorites here. It really evokes sort of like that abyssal, infernal energy that comes from the turn of the century DSBM, which sounds kind of a pretentious term, but I am referring to bands like Leviathan or Judas Iscariot, bands that were just so wretched. And it's surprising to see Black Gaze be not that outsider, but just so hard-hitting and true, basically, to the style of black metal. And a lot of this has a crushing wall of sound, and it's emotionally just the saddest thing. But if you couldn't predict already, I think this thing is great. Probably I would listen to this after the other 2 albums we're going to talk about here. But if you need something to get you into the genre because you're not interested in it yet, then I think this is a good one to start with. And after that, we're covering Neon by Loveless. I'm going to make a few comparisons to Sunbather because this album does compare to it a lot. But I am so glad to finally be talking about this album again. This is the second recording. But either way, Nej is the man. Marcus is the man. Loveless is the band. If you don't know, Loveless is one of my favorite bands. Their album Melting Sun blew me away when I first discovered it, and their latest album was great too. And on this chart, I think Melting Sun could have been included. It is, of course, more post-metal, but it's still very, very shoegazy, and I think if you wanted to say like more Loveless, you could absolutely connect Melting Sun. For some reason, people on Rate Your Music don't love Melting Sun, and I don't understand why. Because I'm pretty sure most people out there like it, they just don't review it on Rate Your Music. But like, people with terrible opinions aside, both of these albums are fantastic. But today we're talking about Neon, which I could compare it to Sunbather by basically saying it is a more concise, consistent, and darker version of Sunbather, basically. And the bass is actually swamped in feedback, which actually gives it a really nice shoegazy callback to basically all these bands that have pretty much created the genre. And Nej's vocals are honestly nearly unmatched. It's hard to find harsh vocals this satisfying. And the riffs are very legible, rather than the whole 12 or 16 bar riffs that Death Heaven will use. They're more like 4 or 8 bars, which some people might complain about. They might think it's too simple, but it does call back to black metal's roots a little bit better, and it is a little more true to form, and it's a little more legible without sort of droning on and on. So honestly, it's up to personal preference, but this is a great album. It's highly emotional, very dark, very gripping, sounds fantastic. And of course, what would any black gaze discussion be without Sunbather by Death Heaven? This is the last truly black gaze album we're going to be talking about today. And I'm just going to say, go watch any of my other videos where I talk about it. I've talked about it 2 times now. I covered it in the Black Gaze Depression Guide. Basically, Death Heaven really did it on this one. They did a great job. All the riffs are crazy good. There's a lot of post-metal stuff going on here. There's even some ambient tracks that are pretty nice. One of them actually features Nej, who I've been talking about this whole video, just doing like a spoken word piece. The vocals of the main guy, whose name I can't remember and I don't want to research because I feel like it's unnecessary at this point. They're incredible, really high-pitched, like aggressive screaming. The guitar tone is very lush, very dreamy. It sounds great, This is the most iconic black gaze record. It's probably not the best, but it's worth pretty much its salt. It's worth discussing. Sure, you might associate it with kind of the soy aspects of like modern day black metal, but I think if you look past that, you're gonna have a great time. This is a great album. So we go back a little bit to, I believe, Skywave's Synth Static, and then we go to a different direction. It says, "Give me more, that's even better." And it is better because we get A Place to Bury Strangers' self-titled record. So I've been getting into Swans recently. I've been working out to their live records, which has been really fun. I really recommend it. But I've been researching them because everyone says that Swans is so loud that apparently one guy got his eardrums blown out at a show once the kick drum was hit particularly hard. And I've seen people online, basically all they'll say about the Swan show is, oh, it's not the loudest. It's not that aggressive. It's like kind of overhyped. That's what I've been seeing recently. But one thing that would frequently show up is people would say they're not as loud as A Place to Bury Strangers. And shoegaze bands are kind of known for being this loud. My Bloody Valentine is up there as one of the loudest current bands we have. But apparently A Place to Bury Strangers just will shred your ears. But if you listen to it on vinyl or a CD or even on Spotify with a good pair of headphones, it will absolutely not shred your ears. Maybe a little bit if you're unaccustomed to the genre of shoegaze. But either way, this is a super cool record. A lot of people complain that it's Jesus and the Mary Chain level worship, but I don't think that's really a necessary criticism because the quality does kind of speak for itself. But it certainly is Jesus and Mary Chain levels of noisy. Everything's coated in abrasive extra bits of texture. But this feels like a very no-nonsense shoegaze record. The textures are all kind of like some Lou Reed stuff going on. Or John Cale. I know Cale added the more experimental stuff. The bass has this awesome, very aggressive bass tone that gives the whole thing a ton of body. And this thing feels pretty groovy at times. If you would compare it to something, I guess you could kind of put it between Jesus and Mary Chain and You Made Me Realize, because it's got that groovy type of bass playing that is all over that EP. And there are actually electronic drums here that give it a really gothic element with some of the heavier hitting drums. The song Falling Sun is one of the best songs here, and the reason this album is placed at this specific part in this chart is probably because of the song. And the song She Dies has what I described as a suicidal amount of harsh noise, the way it's so unbelievably abrasive. We are reaching like Pulse Demon territory of abrasion when we throw harsh noise into our shoegaze here. And it's not all over this record where this happens, and this specific point is actually more abrasive than a couple records we're going to talk about today, at least in terms of this direction. But overall, this album's pretty lush, very beautiful. It's great. And then we go sadder into Les Discret. This is the September album. I don't want to pronounce it. It's got the Crowbeak Man, Plague Doctor on the cover. Basically, if you take these guys and you take Nej and you put them together, you get Amassoir. So Discret plus Alceste equals Amassoir. And I believe the drummer was from Peste Noire. They were all kind of intertwined. So, fun fact. And if you guys don't know who Peste Noire are and you don't understand that joke, just look it up. I'm sure it'll be very fun. Now, this album is kind of strange because it's not necessarily black gaze in its own right, but it's very black gaze adjacent. It feels like black gaze. Like if you weren't paying attention and you talked to me about it after, you'd be like, oh yeah, that black gaze record was really good. Whole lot of post rock and a whole lot of folk. If you take Alceste's debut LP, you get a whole lot of that pastoral sort of foresty vibe going on. Forest, the nature biome, not the Russian NSBM band. And there is a wonderful mix of acoustic guitar and electric guitar here. Very lush rhythm section, while the acoustic guitar has some really interesting folk type melodies on top. And this thing is very progressive in nature. There's a whole ton to appreciate here. Like every song is multifaceted and has several sections that are just beautiful. Track 6, while not being as electronic or distorted, has a very sour feeling to it that actually makes it feel blackened rather than being blackened necessarily. It evokes the same emotions. And it never feels like a gimmick. It just feels melancholic and cool. So I gotta say this is great, It's a solid sort of shoegaze post-rock album. Of course, next to this thing, we could put the Lantlos or any other shoegaze post-metal album. But either way, this goes into sadder, more post-punk with what is potentially the best album we're talking about today, if not the second best, because touching this thing or claiming anything equals its quality is honestly a bold claim. And if it were up to me, this would be in my top 3 shoegaze essential records here, even if it is a bit of an outsider thing. This is Have a Nice Life with their debut full-length album, Death Consciousness. If you guys have talked to me ever or asked me about Death Con or Have a Nice Life in general, I love Dan Barrett and I love this album with my whole life. Like, this album is pretty much everything to me. Like, I make a Topsters list sometimes, and this is just a guaranteed pick on there. Like, a lot of times I try to be elitist and I even swap out Close to the Edge. That's like my favorite album of all time. I'll swap out a bunch of different albums, but Death Con always stays there just because it doesn't matter how deep you are into your music listening or how elitist you think you can be, but Death Con is just undeniable. You can't face this record down and deny its quality. From the opening licks of An Eternal Worm, which is just this beautiful ambient acoustic piece that is just dreamy and rather depressing, till the ending crushing drones of Earthmover, there's not a single second of this album that doesn't hold you tight and feel like you're drowning. This is one of the most depressing albums I've heard, and if you see this out of context, just know I consistently look for depressing albums. No, not Mitski. No, not Radiohead, but I'd be listening to DSBM. I'd be listening to Have a Nice Life, your Leviathans, your Novolers. I actively seek this stuff out, and Have a Nice Life just has such this pervasive sense of songwriting that it just sinks into you so well. Even if you don't know exactly what they're singing about, you're just going to feel it. There isn't a single track on here that I could even deny. They're all great. Even the 2 ambient cuts that are sort of in the middle of each of their sections. The very drony nature of the songs, The Big Gloom and The Hunter, and basically the entire first half of the LP, other than Blood Hail, of course, those are just phenomenal, and they really help you sink into the album. And then you got the second half of the album, which has a bit more of a legible style of songwriting, the almost acoustic sound of the 40K song, before it turns like super harsh. And even songs like I Don't Love, which are like kind of repetitive in nature, have just amazing lyrics. And it's a great penultimate track before my favorite, Earth Mover. But Earth Mover doesn't beat everything else by a lot. It's such a dominating track at 11 minutes in length that it's one of the best songs of all time. I would pick Earth Mover over any My Bloody Valentine track probably, or any Cocteau Twins, or any Slow Dive. You can just throw these names at me and I just pick Earth Mover. I listen to Earth Mover like every other day. But yeah, if you don't know this album, I highly recommend you go watch individual videos on it, or especially just buy it. Don't even listen to it before you buy it, because one, you got to support Dan Barrett and the boys, but two, this thing, I promise, if you like sad music, and don't give me the Mitski is sad thing, because it's not the same. And I am salty about this. I tweet about this a lot. Every time someone's like, "Oh, Mitski, I'm so sad. I'm such a quirky person." I'm like, please listen to something that isn't like alt rock or like Lana Del Rey or like just super basic stuff. Just please get into something a little more deep, a little less inviting. Of course, this album's not inviting at all. It's highly enticing, but it's not a pleasant look at anything. Highly philosophical. But yeah, if you want to ruin your day in the best way possible, DEFCON is undeniable. It's great. And that's probably the only album today that I can say is undeniable. But actually, the next albums we're talking about today, I think are actually so good, you can kind of put them in the conversation with DEFCON. And I know I just went on like an 8-minute talk about DEFCON because I love that thing more than anything. Well, yes, but I've found some truly wonderful shoegaze records that you could easily throw in the bin with your My Bloody Valentines. And first, at this point in the video, is Medicine with Shot Forth Self-Living. From the opening start of the album, the guitar is screeching, and it's not even funny how loud it is. The song One More has this really interesting guitar pattern that seems like it's tearing down the walls of the song around it. When you look at My Bloody Valentine and you see their lead guitar, it does kind of overwhelm the rest of the mix, so that when it cuts to only the rhythm guitar, the whole thing just kind of drones over you. But here, it feels like this thing is actively being extra abrasive, and it feels like a whole different set of textures entirely. It's serving a totally different purpose. Basically, it does the same thing as Kevin Shields' guitar in terms of what it's trying to do, except it does it like it goes twice as far, and it's unforgiving. And what's interesting with that is that there's a whole lot of contrast with songs like Aruka. I think my notes are a little messy, so I might be embarrassing myself because the track title might be something totally different. But it has these super sweet female vocals, like it wasn't just in the middle of basically a Pulse Demon quality of guitar. And half this album has like a Manchester sense of grooviness and almost like a sense of humor. It's kind of bizarre how these elements are all affixed together, but I'm just in love with it. The song Defective is very cute, and that song and a few others on here actually feel like if Ween made shoegaze for some reason. Like this sense of humor, just like the cute sense of humor really kind of resonates. The song Everything is a banger. That's one of the top 10. Everything on this album it's just bangs. It's just great. This is easily one of the top 10 albums I've talked about on this chart so far. So yeah, it's great. And this gets followed up with Cosmic Dust with Snow Noise Assemblage. This is a very similar record, but for me, it's got less of that sense of humor and more of a consistent style, and the peaks of noise are not as intense, but consistently is a lot more intense. There's so much feedback here, it's ridiculous. The guitars can barely be contained, and the vocals are given so much feedback on their own. It's like an extra element of harsh noise on top of this huge swampy mix already. I think for me today, in the terms of shoegaze albums I'll talk about, this is like the final shoegaze album before it turns into something else. The song Swallowed in the Sun is an incredible opener, but it is shocking how different the song Sunday sounds, which is followed right after. And this whole thing is insanely gorgeous. The song Meditate could play while I'm dying, and honestly, I'd hope that's what plays while I die. The song Mom and Pop Candy Store is a popular track to talk about because It's the best interlude of all time. It honestly, it mogs, it wipes the floor with any of your MBV synthesizer tracks or your Loveless interlude parts. It's just that good. And all these drones will swallow you up. This thing is great. Another incredible record. And now we do what I think is where we jump the shark. It says, come on, noisier. Like we didn't already get super noisy. With Shinli Supreme, I think is how it's pronounced. It's XINLI Supreme with the album Tomorrow Never Comes. Now, calling this album shoegaze is a little bit generous. This is one of the last 4 records on this part of the chart here. So it does get kind of noisier than this, but not really. This album is so utterly noisy, it's insane. The first 2 tracks, if they would be the noisiest thing on this whole chart, but the rest of the album does kind of pull you back down a little bit. It does have a super energetic and rocking opening. If you could even tell what notes the guitars are playing, because they're practically noise. The first 2 songs are almost noise with a drum loop, and they're kind of great. And what you've got with this album overall, let me just kind of give you a cursory sort of look at it. It's like a shoegaze noise art rock piece that almost every song is different, and it plays with your emotions like they're toys. Like every song feels drastically different, and the intense amounts of swampy noise feel rather happy in an abstract way. And I want to say like the 3rd or 4th track winds down to this incredibly minimalist sort of like percussive hits that are just pretty rare, that are pretty sporadic, and amongst these hits it feels so cold and lonely at the same time. Now, this is the least enjoyable album I'll be talking about today, but at the same time, it's so essential for art rock and sort of like interesting rock music in general, because it does so much crazy stuff. And I only say that because it's just that abrasive at points. If I could describe this thing as anything, it's extreme. All of like the 100 genres explored here, it all feels like the conclusion to all of them. Every single genre it goes into, it's like there's nothing really else to do in each of these. But it's an intense experience. It's great. I recommend it at least once. And next we get the Goslings with Grandeur of Hair. Now, we've pretty much deviated from traditional shoegaze here, and now we get like a really interesting fusion here between drone metal and shoegaze. And not like Boris, because this thing's also lo-fi as heck, beyond abrasively noisy, huge dosages of slowcore, clean vocals that are actually super cool, super effective, and just a banging album in general. This thing is so elusive and weird that I actually found a Discord page that I'm currently on that talks all about this band. I'd say this album is less abrasive than previous ones we've talked about, but overall it is noisier. Everything on this feels so heavy. And it feels like there's an additional set of oscillators that add harsh noise. Like it feels like there's like an analog specific instrument for just harsh noise elements rather than the melodies brought by the guitars or the bass. And it is distinctly lo-fi. While I had a great experience at my own computer's maximum volume, I feel like you need to play this at just an ear-shattering volume to fully digest it. The song Overnight is one step away from drone metal, and I think it's great. It's a pretty simple album, but I think the experience warranted is just incredible. So that's all I'm going to say about it, but I give this thing a great. And we're not done with this part of the chart. We have 2 more records to talk about, but I'll be done with it for today. But I hope you guys enjoyed. I was very excited to talk about all these. Sorry, I'm a little tired today, but I hope you guys enjoyed this video. What do you think of these records? Tell me what you think about them down below. I would absolutely love to hear what you guys have to say because I love hearing your guys' opinion. And I hope you guys find time to hit the like button, comment your comments, questions, and concerns down below. Follow my social medias in the description. Subscribe, definitely. We just reached like 225 subscribers, It's kind of happening. But that's about it. I hope you guys are having a good day out there. Have a good one. Bye.